Hi, my name is Anne Beckman, and my history project was over the ossuary. Ossuaries for beginners is our first section. So the definition of an ossuary is a receptacle for communal placement of cremated remains. Our first question we're going to ask is, why do ossuaries exist? And the first one is the most prominent, and it's religious traditions. And we've talked about other religious traditions for burial in our other class, Mortuary Arts 1301. And every single religion has a different method for interment, and they've evolved over centuries, and this is one of the methods that has unfortunately died out over the years and has become something similar to cremation. And then another reason is that most decedents, especially in the Catholic faith and Christian at the time, were interred under the very church that they attended, and obviously that would cause a little bit of a space issue because everyone wants to be buried under the church that they attended, but there's limited space. So the clergy had to get a bit creative. And then our catacombs ossuaries. They are very similar, but they are not the same thing. Catacombs are usually very long chambers underground, and when everyone thinks of catacombs, they automatically think of the Paris catacombs, and that is a very good example of them and one of the best, in my opinion. And then ossuaries, unlike catacombs, were usually boxes, and you'll see a picture of one later on that's very similar. And then the process that the body went through before the ossuary is very simple. The body was usually laid out in most religions in nature to be picked off by scavengers, and once the body was bone, they'd go and collect them and put them in the ossuary after cleaning them. And then in the Jewish faith, the body would be interred in a tomb and wrapped in a cloth. And then those who practiced using ossuaries as a method of disposition were Christians. And like I mentioned before, Christians had their churches and they liked to be buried in and around them. And that space issue called for using ossuaries. And they mainly used them for saving space, not so much a religious reason. And then the Zoroastrians. Zoroastrianism is a very old religion that is still practiced today, but not as widely as it once was. And their religion is very nature-centered. They believe that their body should be returned to the earth after death. So they would leave the body out to be picked apart by scavengers. And then in the Jewish faith, the body would be wrapped in linen and placed in a tomb. This is exactly how Jesus Christ was interred in the Bible after he was crucified. Some important ossuaries. The first ossuary that was discovered, not counting the churches that already stood, was the James ossuary discovered in 2002. It was found in the Silwan area of Kidron Valley in Jerusalem, and it caused a lot of controversy within the community that found it, as well as the religious community. And that is because it was inscribed with the name and the phrase, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. And there were other ossuaries found within that tomb that said Joseph, Maria, Mary, Joseph, and thank you, Cherry, and Judah, son of Jesus. And obviously this caused a bit of a stir within the religious community. And the ossuary itself has been confirmed to be authentic to the time period and the location that the tomb was found in. And the tomb itself has yet to be confirmed as actually that of Jesus Christ. But for now, the tomb is known as the Family of Jesus tomb. And obviously, if this was confirmed to be true, it would cause a huge stir within the religious community. So we can only wonder and see where this takes us. And then we have the Sedlec ossuary. This is my personal favorite. It's located in Kunta Hora, Chechnya, and it's dated back to the 13th century. It is the oldest ossuary still around today. And as you can see, just from this photo, this is their famous bone chandelier. It is a very elaborate design, and it is absolutely stunning. It is a little eerie, I will admit that. but it contains 40,000 to 70,000 bodies, leaning more towards the 40,000 area. And just looking at all of that, you can see how those different body parts came together in such a beautiful way. And this is because they were commissioned. A artist was commissioned to do this beautiful artwork, and it includes the chandelier and a coat of arms made out of bones. And then in the church, there's also the artist's signature in bone. And then the reason why there are so many people buried here is because in the time that this church was being built, some dirt was brought over by Abbot Henry from where Jesus was supposedly interred after he was crucified. And it was scattered around, and everyone was like, hey, I want to be buried there. So that's how it became one of the most famous churches in Bohemia at the time. And then we have the Santa Maria della Concezione Ossuary. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, I'm terrible. And then it's located in Rome, Italy, and it's dated into 1631. So it is a little older than the Sedlec ossuary that we discussed previously. It was originally built by Capuchin monks to keep all of them together in death. The Capuchin monks were ordered by Cardinal Antonio to gather their dead and inter them all in one place. And they took their dead from the 16th century all the way from 1530 and put them in there. And then I believe that they stopped interring people in that ossuary around 1807. And then it exhibits semi-mummified whole bodies and not just bones, whereas the Sedlec ossuary only displays bones, but it still has very elaborate designs. And Marquis de Sade in 1775 quoted it, his experience seeing it, as "I have never seen anything more striking." And I honestly have to agree with him. It is another beautiful example. And some of the designs include a room full of pelvises, which is exactly as it sounds. And it includes a skeleton surrounded by a circle of bones, holding a scale and a scythe, which are all made of bones. And then a fun fact that I found is that since the invention of electricity and the common use of it, they put some lights in the mummy's eyes to make the eternal light shine through them. And then our conclusion today. The end of ossuaries. They weren't as popular as time went on because they were seen as macabre. And people think of bones as spooky now and associate them with bad things and with a lot of disease and just general nastiness. And then, like I said before, they were seen as unsanitary. Bones are usually seen as part of the deceased body, meaning that they are private and likely unclean. And obviously that is not true. With the ossuary, Sedlec especially, all of the bones are sanitized and were sanitized before they were put in that arrangement. And then traditional burials became more common as values changed. People preferred to be just buried in the ground or embalmed and buried or cremated or just kept in an ossuary instead of being buried directly under their church, and more accessible ways and places of being buried became available. And then the modern ossuary is the columbarium. We've talked about this. It's where you put cremated remains. It contains a bunch of different ones with each a separate compartment. And this is similar to the tombs that the ossuaries would be kept in. The ossuary and funeral service. The evolution of the disposition of remains. From bodies staying with the family to large communal burial sites. Usually with ossuaries, the remains of the deceased would stay with the family or in a family tomb, whereas now we have cemeteries containing multitudes of families, and usually the families aren't contained in one area. They could be scattered around, or even a part of the family could be all the way in a different state. And then bodies went from being displayed to being hidden. And this is mostly because society became more private. They didn't think that the body, especially a dead body, needed to be on display like that. And then changes within the norm of society. Like I said, society became more proper and preferred to have everything be very private and between the family and the decedent rather than the family, the decedent, and the public. And funeral services became more and more important. And then my Works Cited page. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you found this entertaining and insightful.